Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Atlantic Institute's discussion on COVID and the changes of grieving that we've experienced over the past year. We are coming up actually on our 1-year anniversary of COVID and being quarantined. I think for some of us, we remember what we were doing this time last year. So I wanted to go ahead. My name is Christina, and I am with Atlantic Institute. I'm the coordinator for the organization. I'm going to go ahead and share with you guys a short video on what Atlantic Institute is, so that I'm going to share my screen quick and share this video of what we are, so that you understand a little bit about our organization. And then we'll come back to, you should all be able to see my screen. Let's go ahead and go full screen with this and hit play.
The Atlantic Institute is a nonprofit organization dedicated to promoting harmonious coexistence between peoples of various cultures, faiths, and backgrounds. We seek this goal through peaceful dialogue, education initiatives, and community organization. Our dialogue events bring together experts, community and faith leaders, and knowledge seekers to address social issues that affect us all. We feel dialogue is the most important element in peaceful coexistence, so we try and maintain several discussions, TED Talk events, and book clubs throughout the year. These events touch on social issues, race relations, and cultural understanding, and are a mainstay of our programming. The Atlantic Institute's education events are extremely important to our mission of understanding. We want to promote socially forward critical thinking to students of all ages. To that end, we have developed programs that seek to grow the creative spirit of students and help them think about their communities and the world around them. Our Future Leaders of Dialogue event brings together nominated elite students to learn from each other as well as political and business leaders. Our art and essay contest gives students a theme about important societal issues and allows them to create wonderful works of art and writing while steering their minds towards improving their world. We're always seeking ways to educate youths and adults in order to make a peaceful world for all of us. Our community events are designed to transform neighbors into friends and groups of people into a community. By associating with other nonprofits or by our own initiative, we are always trying to discover new avenues to improve our neighborhoods, places of worship, and community centers. We host cooking demonstrations of food from other cultures, work with various nonprofits to help elevate the work of others, and try to find a way to make the lives of those who are disenfranchised or marginalized better. Building a more peaceful world starts in our backyards, so we are dedicated to improving our communities and associations. The Atlantic Institute is always seeking like-minded volunteers and collaborators. If you would like to learn more, find volunteer opportunities, or just want to chat with our staff, please visit our website at www.atlanticinstitutesc.org or follow us on Facebook. We will never run out of fun, educational, peaceful events, so come join us to help make this world a better place full of understanding and unity.
Okay, so thank you. I watch this sometimes and I think about the fact that we didn't have on masks back then, and we didn't worry about all kinds of stuff back then. And I'm like, oh, look at those pictures. But I will tell you, just so you all know, we still are doing cooking classes. So we are doing them virtually, and they're really are quite popular. We've had like 30 people. We have people from London. We have people from California, from all over that have been on these cooking classes. So it's been really interesting how we've shifted and grown. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the conversation that we have tonight over to Dr. Peter Cohen. He is from Clemson University, and he is from the religion department over there. He will introduce our panel. This is the first event we've had this year that we've actually have a larger panel than we normally would. So I'd like to just let you know that you can ask questions in the chat section, and what we will do is I will read them out to everybody when it's time for the question to be asked. So if you have anything like that, we'll let, just so you know, that's how I'll moderate it all. All right, so go ahead, Peter. I'll turn this over to you.
Christina, why don't you introduce everyone and Akif? to
Oh.
the group. How does that sound?
Okay, that works. That works. I will introduce, we have Shayla Shroff. She is here. Shayla, if you want to wave. She is representing the Vedic faith or Hindu faith, and she's from Charleston, South Carolina. We have Imam Shahid here. He is from the mosque in Columbia, South Carolina. We have Eddie Nelson from the Nelson's Funeral Homes. He is in the, I was going to say Columbia area, I think.
Right outside of Columbia,
Yes.
Fairfield County Ridgeway.
Yes. And he has some very interesting information for us. Let's see. Then we have Rabbi Marco. He is from Congregation Beth Israel in Greenville, South Carolina, and he's on vacation right now in Oregon. So we thank you very much. We're quite appreciative of the fact that you stopped vacation to come in and speak with us. Then we have
forgive me sitting in my trailer, by the way. So
no problem. We have Reverend Zachary Brewster, and he is from one of the local churches in Greenville, South Carolina, that is here to speak with us. And then we have Dr. Akif Iden, and he's the president of Atlantic Institute. So we are all here tonight to listen and learn. So I hope that was a good introduction, Dr. Cohen.
Very good. What we want to do this evening is discuss with you how grieving has changed given COVID-19 and the pandemic, the circumstances that we've been going through, and how it's affected our congregations and other things. And it's interesting, when we discussed the other night, we did discuss some positive aspects of that. Eddie, I'd like to start with you. I've got a question for you in particular.
Sure.
Have you seen people putting off funeral arrangements for things like memorial services at a later date or things of that nature?
Yes, we've had a lot of services this year where, especially with the cremations and even funerals, where we were limited people for participating in services where they're going to come back and do things on the person's anniversary date of death or a special event such as their birthday or wedding event, that they're coming back and doing these memorial services and funeral services per se, gatherings so that they can have more of the grieving process.
Just a quick follow-up to that. Many of the traditions represented here this evening do not normally at all do cremation. But has your cremation request gone up in number?
Yes, we've had an influx in cremations due to COVID.
Due to COVID.
Especially when COVID first came out, there wasn't a firm directives as to whether embalm the decedents or direct burials or cremations. And I've had a lot of families who have called me in the times that chosen cremations when they wouldn't normally choose cremations, because they said, we don't want to expose you. We don't want to put you in harm's way. We don't know anything about this disease. And Ms. Nelson, we just don't want to put you in harm's way. What are our alternatives other than cremation if they didn't choose cremation? And immediately we could do direct burial.
Okay. Zachary, what tradition do you represent, your church?
the Christian tradition.
Any particular denomination or?
No, we're non-denominational. I will say I've pastored a Baptist church in the past, though.
Okay.
I pastored a Baptist church for 8 years before I became a non-denominational pastor.
And have you seen any changes within the grieving process, as well as preparation for burial and things of that nature within your congregation?
In our experience, the African-American experience, whether you're Baptist or Methodist or non-denominational or Pentecostal, has always been a grieving process of fellowship. And that's gone now. And it's been very challenging for some people. I had some people with a death in their families just this week. And typically they would have a house where people would be there all week long and bringing food and telling stories and reminiscing over times of joy that they had with the person. That doesn't happen anymore. After every funeral, there was typically a repast where there would be food brought in fellowship at a church or a local community center, or even at a home if it was large enough. That's not happening anymore. So the changes have been major in the funerals in our tradition. There's a lot of singing. There's no singing at these funerals. It's happening at the graveside. It's very open shut. So there are a lot of changes that are happening in that tradition.
Shayla, you mentioned the other night the aspect of drive-by grieving and things of that nature within your tradition. How has that operated?
Well, we have layers of grieving. It could be rituals, it is religious, it's spiritual, and it is basically social. Those all elements are very important in the funeral. But now with COVID, they have adjusted it to the new ideas. So rituals are still done in many of the funeral homes, where usually most of us are actually cremation is the way we go. So now most of the churches or funeral homes, they allow the priest and very close friends. Now a social element of a funeral is kind of huge. People want to show their respect to the body, and people want to see the people who are grieving or the close family. And that part is now getting onto the Zoom or the YouTube or channels, and you will have all the people. And it is very amazing that now people from all over the world can come together. Many times a Zoom funeral, we can see the rituals happening. We'll see the very close family. Some of the funeral homes allow only 7 to 8 people, 10 people at the most. In New Jersey, New York area, they have a big TV set put outside, so people can park there and see the funeral inside. And then one which I was talking about that day was in Charleston, where they did the funeral, which was on Zoom, close family, but the other family, to see the social part of it, we just drove by the people who were outside sitting on the lawn, and we drove by and put the mask. And if we want, we will have 6 feet of 6 foot feet difference, and we greeted them. And the religious part is we sing religious song. And sometimes if you don't have a priest, because in New Jersey area, there were very few priests. In India, I was told that they didn't allow those elaborate funerals or cremation. So nobody could go into cremation. But then they say we adjusted. We stayed at home and did the rituals and everything. You don't have to be with what we
Rabbi,
call Shabbat.
you spoke, and would you address the preparation of the importance of preparation within Judaism in the mourning process prior to the burial and then after burial takes place, and how it's changed? You've muted.
I'm sorry, the first part of you broke up. Can you please start that? I'm terribly
could
sorry.
you mention how the preparation of a body has changed for you personally?
Okay.
Because people don't know about that for the most part.
Well, we refer to the person as a met, not as a body. It's more of a, I don't like body, because this was the vessel that carried this person's soul through this world, is the way we view it. And Jewish tradition has long held that one of the greatest acts of loving kindness that one can do is to prepare someone for burial and to bury him, because of all the acts of kindness that you can do for someone, all the favors you might offer, be it give them a ride, or cook them a meal, or lend them money. These are all things that someone can say thank you, or can maybe one day reciprocate. But when someone has made their final journey and you help them along, that's something you do purely out of love, because they can't say thank you and they can't reciprocate. And one of the ways we do it is we don't allow strangers to prepare the people that we love. We have a society called the Chevra Kadisha, which literally means a holy society. And in normal times, men take care of men and women take care of women for reasons of modesty. But 4 or 5 of us would get together. The funeral homes that we work with understand our practices, and they're very accommodating, and they will allow us use of their facilities. And we'll go in, and what we do is we'll first of all wash and purify the deceased, the Met, and then we dress them in a ritual shroud with psalms and prayers that go along with it. Since COVID began, we kind of curtailed that. We, especially in the beginning when we had no idea how these things were transmitted, and then the notion of having 4 of us together in very close proximity, working together over our Met, just wasn't wasn't a risk worth taking, especially when some of our people had died from COVID and we still didn't know what the transmission was. So we Judaism has a principle called pikuach nefesh, which says that the preservation of life and health take precedence over all religious expedience. So immediately we stopped doing that, unfortunately, and families do request it. And so the workaround is this: the funeral homes that we work with are very sensitive to our needs, and I showed them how we properly wash and dress our deceased, and I have them do it. And then what I do is I will go in privately before the burial, and we will open the casket, and I will spend some time with the Met and offer the proper prayers that we believe will help the soul make the transition into the next realm. And so it's not ideal, but it's the best that we can do, and so that's what we do.
Okay.
Oh, by the way, and we don't embalm and we don't cremate, so that adds an extra stricture of burying very, very rapidly, usually within a day or 2 tops. And with COVID, that made things, obviously it makes things very difficult because of travel and things like that. So we've also been adapting. We've been relying upon technology and doing the best that we can, and figuring the Holy One will certainly understand and forgive us.
Sure. And Imam, I don't believe that your religion wants cremation either. That is correct, is it not?
That is correct. Rabbi kind of hit right on the head with, we're very much similar.
Very much so.
Yes.
And how has some of your preparations and different rituals changed during the past year?
Well, as was mentioned, we have a shrouding, a washing and shrouding of the deceased. And usually, if we have strong family members, they would take part in that washing and shrouding. The females would work with the females, the males would work with the males. And it's sort of therapeutic. We've had several young men who helped to prepare their fathers. And it was very therapeutic for them, very helpful. They talked about the experience. Right. Since COVID, we were not sure of how it would be transmitted. So we were challenged. Again, what we have is a simple, we try to bury the person within 3 days. And the challenge is that we normally have the prayers for the deceased, and the prayers are performed by, the community. What we've had to do is reduce those prayers to graveside. right at the grave site is where we would have the prayers. And the prayers are very short. You can do them within 10 minutes for the deceased. We have to show that respect. So the washing and the shrouding and the perfuming, making sure that the body is and then we try to use, now it depends on where you are. We have several locations where we're not required to have a vault or a casket. So that means we will use biodegradable material, okay? And make sure that, as it was said in our prophet, he said, make sure that the body returns back to the system of matter, because the soul is where we really are. The body, the carrier, as
Yep.
Rabbi mentioned, it's a transport for us, but the soul is the real essence. And so we come together. What has challenged us has been not being able to gather afterwards to show that kind of support to the family.
How many people have been coming together for the actual burial?
We've had the highest number we've had with the ones that we performed was 10 to 15. Social distancing, mask, everything of that nature. And but it's been challenging to us. We do have someone at the funeral home. I want to mention this, at one of the funeral homes that we work with, that he is a Muslim and he works with the funeral home. So it's a great help for us, great help. And we're able to get around some things without persons being able to go in themselves. They have the proper material and the gear to help process the whole situation for us. And that's very helpful.
Yeah. And Zachary, how many people have you had present at a burial?
It varies, probably on the high end since COVID, maybe 20. And normally it's less than that.
Okay. And Shayla, at a cremation and burial, how many have you seen in your community?
It actually depends on the funeral home, how many people they allow. But if without COVID, we will have full 150, 200 people. It's always full hall because close people, but it's very social also event. 100 people is nothing less.
But with COVID, how many have you had?
That is 10 people. They allow 10 people, some people 6 people. But I told you, there is a TV, there is a Zoom, there is a YouTube, there is Facebook.
Sure.
So they keep it on that. So there are many people together.
And Rabbi, I know you've had a number of funerals. How many people have been present for yours?
We have a particular challenge in that there are certain prayers that require what we call a minyan. And minyan is a minimum of 10 adult Jewish people that comprises the minimum definition of a community. And one of the prayers that require a minyan is Kaddish. Kaddish literally means holiness, and it's a prayer we say over our deceased graveside upon burial. So we've been challenged with that minimum of 10 in the very, very earliest days of that. We simply dispensed with it, especially when it was cold and rainy. And I said, well, and what we did was I tried to look at the halakha. Halakha is the way we look at Jewish law. The equivalent would be Sharia in Islam. And the law is important because we view the law as directly from God. Yet there are ways to legislate and to interpret the law. So we all tried to find our loosest interpretation where we're still staying true to our beliefs and our values and still taking care of the people that need to be taken care of. So there was a time where I was holding by a Zoom minyan. As long as we had 10 adult Jews present, I defined present in a much broader sense. Nowadays, we try to have a minimum of 10 because we know that if we're outside and if we're masked, we know that the aerosols in the package don't necessarily, that you're nothing's 100%, but it's pretty close. But we still try to limit the funerals to simply the immediate family and immediate friends to keep these numbers down. And then in all the announcements, we simply say, everybody else is certainly welcome to join via Zoom or FaceTime or whatever particular platform we're using. What's more difficult is for the next 7 days, for the initial 7 days of mourning, which we call Shiva. It's customary to have a daily prayers in the home of the mourners, where we also say Kaddish, and we need 10 people to do that. So normally we'd have several times during the day where the community would show up at the house, and you bring food. This way the mourners don't have to worry about anything but mourning and loving one another and healing their souls. And that's something that we've just simply not been able to do unless people have enough outside space. And I would imagine when I speak to my other my colleagues who are also caregivers and lovers of humanity, I think this is something that probably transcends all of our different traditions. Though I think the more we look at our traditions, the more we figure out we have far more in common than we have that divides us. But the one thing is we're all human beings, and my guess is the imam, the pastor, and the reverend, all the same thing. When you get a phone call that one of your congregants is in need, your first instinct is to hop in your car and run over and be with them and put your arms around them. And that has been, I would say, forget all the ritual stuff, that has been the most difficult thing to try to hold back from, to say, well, I can't do that.
Right.
Now, thankfully, I can. I've had my second inoculation and I feel far more comfortable. But it's still, it's very hard to not be face to face with people who need your love and your arm around their shoulder.
The prayer that the rabbi is referring to is, he's called Kaddish, and he translated it as a holy or holiness. Very often people refer to it as the mourner's prayer, but it really isn't about mourning. It's glorification of God more than anything else. Eddie, one question I do have is, I hate to, well, you're involved in a business to a certain extent, and you do have certain, like many other places like dentists, doctors' offices, certain requirements that have to be taken care of. Has your industry, so to speak, passed down certain requirements, safety measures that have to be taken at funeral homes?
Yes, universal precautions has always been practiced. However, some of us over the time and years have relaxed the universal precautions. However, in the heightened season here, we're dealing with COVID, we had to go back and reinforce and recreate our standards of universal practices. And some of the things that we're doing as far as coming into your funeral homes, temperature checks. We're doing temperature checks. We're doing, make sure that there's hand wash and sanitized. You'll be able to wash your hands. And we're limiting the number of people that can come into the funeral home. What we just did, our service arrangement this morning. Normally, there is sometimes we have gone up to 10 people who have sat around the conference table to make arrangements with loved ones. So what we have to do now, I'm only allowing 4 people to come to our conference table, and anyone else that wants to join us, they join us via Zoom. And so that they can have some sense of participation in their final rites and selections and arrangements for their loved one. So that sort of takes away the temperature, take away the edge, sort of speak, by having some of them involved. When it comes down to actually doing the funeral services or coming in to see their loved one for the first time, we only allow 25 people to come in. our chapel seats about 150 to 180 people. So we are able to social distance those individuals and sometimes place them in rooms across the hall in the overflow area where they can actually look at the TV monitors that's over in the other area, viewing areas.
Oh, so you have those set up there.
Yeah, we have those set up. So if individuals are coming in, and then when persons are coming in from the community just to pay the respect to the individuals, we only allow 10 people in at a time, and that is a walk through. Temperature checks and walk through. There's no sitting, anything. They're just coming in, and of course they can't do any signing of register books and register that they came by to show their respect. So we ask people to go out to our website and send the condolences that way. So
is that a similar practice that all of you have been having at your congregations? No longer the memorial book, so to speak, but a virtual sign-in, so to speak?
Yes, that's what most of us have been doing. Because, you know, we want to alleviate the touch points, picking up a pen, passing
Yeah.
out, you know, those things that you don't think of, and it's highly contagious.
Has the mosque been open in Colombia at all for prayer?
The mosque where I'm located, we haven't opened maybe about 3 or 4 or 5 persons, but we have not opened at this time. Gervais Street Mosque is open, and there's another one. We have 5 locations in Colombia.
Wow.
So I'm told that 2 of them are operating, but social distancing is very much encouraged. I know at one particular, but we have not. We're trying to determine now how we're going to open up and to the public, I mean, to our congregation. I'm sorry, and not to full capacity, but at the same time, the number that we open up to, we want to follow the CDC guidelines and be safe. I know Saudi Arabia, they didn't have the Hajj this year in
Right.
Mecca.
Correct.
Yes. So, and many of the mosques across the country, the world, I'm sorry, they closed down. Some, maybe Iran and Pakistan, they're opening up some, but they are observing social distancing.
The Hajj, for those of you that aren't aware, is the pilgrimage that's done once a year, which is one of the 5 pillars of Islam.
Yeah.
Anyone who is able to is required to take part in it at least once in their lifetime.
Yeah.
Zachary, has your congregation met at all in your building?
So it's funny you ask that. We spent from the 3rd week of March last year until the last week in February not meeting in person. And this past Sunday was the first Sunday we met in person. We decided to mask everyone up. We made the decision, not really based on the governor's order here in South Carolina, it was really more everybody's going everywhere else in mask. Why not mask them up in here? Now we have mask required. You can't take it off the entire time unless you're on stage. And so we started back this past Sunday. We'll be open from now on.
And how has, what was the response by your congregation?
It was pretty good. For the first week, we had a little over 100 people show up in person. We still stream live online. So it was made very clear if you're uncomfortable coming in, don't. And so we had people that still streamed. We're going to stream no matter what. We were streaming before this, so this was an easy transition for us. But I expect that the crowd size is going to pick up. We had a youth event on Wednesday night that was pretty strongly attended, and I think people are going to get in the flow of coming back to church, and I'm excited about it.
I had a question.
Okay, go
Peter,
ahead.
if I could throw in. So I know that there is some of the rituals that have changed and some of the different processes that have changed in this grieving process in this past year. But all of you here represent like a larger group of people. And so I'm wondering about the grief, like there's different stages of grief that people go through, that having a funeral and having a ending kind of like helps to give some closure, and I know that there has been a numerous people that I have a friend who her mother just died last week, and they said they're not going to have anything due to COVID and they'll have something later. I'm wondering, how has the first, I feel sad for some of these people that are dying, and they know that they must know like nobody's going to come to anything because they're not going to have any kind of funeral or anything. And I'm just wondering how the mental, I don't know if you know what my question is, like the mental health of some of these individuals has been with this lack of this togetherness that we've usually experienced in society when we have somebody that has passed. Like, for example, my friend in Florida, I've used this a couple of times, her 12-year-old daughter died on the river last summer. It was a very, very tough thing. And they took a baseball field and they had a parking lot full of people and they broadcasted it on the radio, and everybody came in their vehicles, and then they had everybody drove around the baseball field so they could wave to the family, and they had pictures and they had things around the field that you could see as you were driving, just because I've thought for surely we have to have some closure for this. Surely, like, this like requires some sort of something. We can't just have nothing for this. And so I was impressed that they came up with this vastly socially distanced thing back in like June of last year, when there was a lot of heightened awareness for this. And so I'm curious, like the mental health of some of the people that have lost loved ones,
Shayla, have you seen in your community any issues with mental health of people who have lost people close to them?
I don't know. We have so many doctors in the Indian community. Usually, those kind of problems are not evident. They always get help from someone close by, friendly. But I bet they are, losing somebody whom you love and was part of your life is always a sad thing for them to make it as a part of their life, that the person won't be there. But I told you that on spiritual level, we go very deep than that. So many people can cope up with it.
Yeah. How about Zachary in your congregation? How has, you've seen this. How are people dealing with it? I guess is the easy way of putting it.
From a grief perspective or just from a fellowship perspective?
Personal grief for people that have gone through loss.
It's very difficult. I think some of the things that have been echoed here tonight are true. They don't feel like they've truly had an opportunity to honor the person because they've not been able to carry out the traditions. In the African American tradition, especially for an elderly person, people have a habit of planning their funerals. Yeah. Talking about what that day will look like and things of that sort. And those plans are no more. I mean, that's not happening the way they thought it would be. And it's just a totally different experience. And so you have a section of people who feel as though they've just truly not been able to give that person their just due in terms of sending them off the right way.
And Imam, how about in your community?
We've had the challenge similar to what everyone has said. What I personally try to do along with my staff is keep contact. Call just to express a willingness to help out wherever we can help out. Let them know that we are there. So I
Mhm.
think that's been very helpful for us because keeping in contact, when you can take some food by, something to show the compassion and love. But one thing I just want to add this is that we have those 5 daily prayers that keep us connected, and that has been very helpful because I've heard many say that they've been working, they've been going to school, the children have been going to school. Since they have been home, families have gotten better support, better, closer to each other. I've heard the divorce rate has gone up in some areas, but our families have been telling me, they've told me that they've gotten closer together. They got a better understanding of how prayer can help to deal with some of the grief.
Yeah.
And
This,
that's
for those of
very
you
helpful.
that don't know Islam, this is apart from the grieving process, the requirement to have 5 prayers daily within Islam.
Yeah.
Rabbi, how about your congregation?
You know, I think in many ways, human beings are very resilient creatures. The Almighty put a very strong soul in us. But at the same time, our traditions have been designed, I think, to allow us to follow a certain stage, certain pathways through grief, through the wilderness, essentially, to come through on the other side. The person who said, who coined the phrase "time heals all wounds," first of all, I'd like to say that person was an idiot, or they never lost anybody, because our pain changes, but it's never gone. Anybody who's ever loved anybody knows exactly what I'm talking about. But we do have stages of grief. I mentioned the initial 7-day period. Then there's a 30-day period. But then the full period of official mourning ends in a year. And our tradition is not saying you're over it and you're never going to think about this person and cry. But it's saying now it's time to get on with the business of life and living. And we usually mark that with what's called an unveiling. We don't put up a marker stone for a year. And then in a year, we all come back together. And what I found, it's happening an awful lot in my community. Funerals are not put off because you can't, right? You have no choice. But the unveiling is being put off. And they're saying, we want to wait until people can really come here and be together. And they're putting off the unveiling. And I can think of one person in particular, and he was a pretty dear friend of mine. And he passed, it was a year in November. And we should have had his unveiling. And now it's 5 months later. And I know his widow is still in some ways very much in limbo. Not that she would immediately do the unveiling and now, enter the dating scene. But it's a milestone that we've not marked, and that's made it a little more difficult. The other thing, especially in the early days of the pandemic, I had several congregants who died alone because we were not allowed to go in and be with them. And I had, especially in the early days when I was counseling my families, and they're like, well, we're thinking of putting mom or dad in hospice. And I said to them, I beg you, if it's at all possible, if you have the resources, keep them at home. Do in-home hospice. Do not put them in a facility because you won't be able to be with them. I mean, there were people, the best that I was able to accomplish is having a nurse hold up an iPad in front of them for me to offer the vidui.
Wow.
When I want to be with them and holding their hands, and the family wants to be with them. And that's something that I think the family, they're always going to carry some guilt or regret with them because mom and dad were alone. And that's, wow.
Are you still doing kriya with the families?
We're doing kriya's tearing of the clothing, and that's easily enough accomplished because we pass out ribbons and things like that. But what has been interesting, especially in the early days, I mentioned that it's a chesed shelamed, it's a true act of kindness to prepare someone for burial. and that culminates in the actual burial. Our tradition is that we bury the people, and so at first, I was like, well, I don't want people touching the same spade. We really didn't know, right? So we were being as cautious as we possibly could. So normally I would have 2 or 3 spades, and at the end of the funeral, people would line up and throw a couple of scoopfuls of earth to help bury their loved one. And for a while, I'm like, well, okay, we need lots and lots of shovels, or we need to be spraying in between, or we had red Solo cups at one time. We passed
Oh,
out
wow.
red Solo
Yeah.
cups and, did that. What I eventually arrived at, I said, we just need a lot of hand wipes and we just use your hands. And that actually turned out to be a very visceral, cathartic experience to literally play, kind of what the Imam said. And that's something I want to actually explore in our community, that you actually have the family members do the washing and shrouding. We generally don't. Now, the longer I do my job, the more friends I do it for. Obviously, the longer I'm at the same place, the more people that I love, I'm doing it. And it is it's a very profound experience on a lot of levels. Number one, it's cathartic. That it's final. But for me, it's always one of those issues where I look down and I think, well, one day I'm going to be laying on that table. And I sure hope it's people who knew me and loved me, and they're taking care of me with the same love. So, Peter, we're adapting, but yeah, I think to answer Christine's question, there's a hole left in our process, and while we're doing the best we can, I think, it's less than ideal, right, but it's what we have.
You did mention one thing that, a generation or so ago, people wouldn't be dying in hospitals or facilities, so to speak. They would be dying at home. And this is, this really is different now.
Yes.
Having people literally leaving, once they go out the door, so to speak, they're gone. And it must be very difficult for the family who are, luckily I've had no one in my family has been affected directly in this manner, but I'm sure the guilt of saying goodbye to someone, knowing you won't even see them again, let alone anything else, has got to be.
Now it's gotten to the point where you can go in. I mean, it's been for like 6 months I've been able to go in with the family on a very limited basis. And, I tell you, until the inoculation, it felt like I was entering sort of the zombie apocalypse. I mean, it felt so frightening for me to walk in, because I know that I'm going to go home to my family. Yeah. It's just a very frightening thing. But now, I mean, I think we know more. And we can feel, as long as we reach a certain level of precautions, I think we can, then the risk and the reward benefit is pretty clear to me, but it's certainly worth it to be with.
Definitely.
I had something. My husband's cousin was admitted for COVID in a hospital. Within 2 days, his wife was put in the hospital in another hospital. And then their son got sick again with COVID. He was put in the third hospital because they don't want to be in the same hospital. This is in Mumbai. But what happened was the father passed away. They cannot tell it to the mother. Then the mother passed away. They didn't tell it to the son. And they didn't tell even us, like we were asking, how is he doing? They say he's doing all right, but he's still in the hospital. And they didn't tell that they passed away for about 6 weeks until the son came home.
Wow.
Because they didn't want anybody to say to the son who is in a hospital that your parents passed away, because it would be such a shock that he could not be with them when they were dying. If we are very people conscious, relation type people. So it is very important to pay the respect. But I think it is the saddest story. They didn't tell. And I was telling Vijay, it is impossible to keep somebody for 6 weeks in the hospital. You just wash away all your makings, your all the money that you ever made. But anyway, that's what happened. Then they said after the son came home, they told everybody that he passed away on such and such a day.
Oh.
But they couldn't do anything for the father or mother.
Mom, you mentioned
So sad.
the daily prayers were keeping families together to a large extent. I read something just the other day that there have been a number of people, a popular website in Judaism has had a daily minyan, a daily quorum of prayer every day on Zoom. And some people have responded by saying they wouldn't normally go to a synagogue, but they could take a few minutes to do this, to say a few prayers, and it gives them a great deal of comfort and solace. And I think in both instances, that's a positive, where our traditions can, look on the bright side, so to speak.
Yeah.
Do any of you others see any bright spots possibly within the process now that you hadn't thought of before? Eddie or Zachary or the rabbi?
I first of all, I want to say, because a lot of people have said, "Oh, so when did you close?" And my answer is, we never closed. We just sort of changed the way we did things. For us, it's been just over about a week and a half, over a year, and I know that because the last time we had a normal, carefree gathering together was Purim last year. And Purim was just about 11 or 12 days ago, which means I'm starting to get really nervous because Passover is right around the corner. And so one Shabbat, we were not ready because we do not stream because of various rules regarding the Sabbath and what constitutes work and what does not constitute work. So it took me 1 week to sort of crash course, learn technology, get ourselves in lines and go. And similar to what the Imam has said, I've actually found that participation in worship has gone up in many ways than before. Now, I know people need it. People are very lonely. They feel like they need to connect so they can connect through our services. But also what I found about Shabbat, now, ideally, Jews pray 3 times a day. Now, whether or not they all do, and my guess is the same with you, Imam. You would like your people to pray 5 times a day, but you take what you can get, right?
Yeah, good point.
So, and the same with Jews. But if nothing else, Shabbat, that day, which is a day that we mark time, which is a day that we acknowledge the Creator who created us, and I think all of our, or not, I shouldn't say all of our, but the 3 great Western monotheistic religions understand, at least metaphorically, that God created the world in 6 days and then rested. In this sort of Groundhog Day movie of life that we're living right now, where every single day feels like the last day. We don't leave our houses. We're working from home. What makes today different from yesterday? I've found that Shabbat has become a really, really important institution. So many of my congregants, and they're logging on to Shabbat. I don't necessarily fool myself into believing that once they log off, they're not going on Facebook or mowing their lawn. Maybe they are. I'm not the Shabbat police. But if for nothing else, for an hour or two, they're stopping what they're doing and they're saying, well, today is different. Today is a day that's holier than all days. All time is holy, but we're acknowledging this time is more holy, and we're spending time with one another. And I've always thought that religion is not what happens in a church or a temple or a center or a mosque or a synagogue. Religion is what is how we are in the world, how we interact in God's world, how we walk God's ways. That's religion. We go to a church or a mosque or a temple or a synagogue to recharge those spiritual batteries, so that when we are out walking in the world, we're walking God's way. And I found that that's sort of, in some ways has strengthened. And this whole technology bell that we've rung now in Judaism, I don't see it being unrung, and that's okay. I see keeping our streaming. We're going to adapt it in certain ways where nobody has to initiate the technology, because I cannot wait, Peter, until the day where I can do Shabbat without touching a computer. I mean, because these are things that I turn off on Shabbat, and this is I turn off on Shabbat, but I can't right now.
Well, you can have someone else run the computer for you during the
even
service.
Even that I don't want to do it. No, I've even that, because the whole thing.
Right.
So, but no, I've looked into services where you simply can pre-program them, and it automatically initiates at a certain time, and it'll just run for the whole 24 hours. Some of the good things about it, though, is like we've had b'nai mitzvahs. That's the coming of age of a 13-year-old Jewish boy or a girl, so like a confirmation, things like that, and they're generally done on the Sabbath. So we've never, you can't videotape them because we don't do that. So the b'nai mitzvahs that have had their coming of ages in the past year, whether they've been in person, outside in distance, or on Zoom, are the first ones to actually have a videotape of their bar mitzvah and their bat mitzvah, and that's something that will remain in the future. This will be an option in the future. So
have they actually read from a physical Torah?
Some have and some have not.
Yeah, that's something is an issue.
Yes, when we've done it remotely, they've not. But earlier you went around and you were talking about what people have they been meeting in person. We were meeting virtually all summer long, and then towards the end of the summer, when we were learning more about these things, I was in consultation with a lot of our congregants who happen to be physicians, as well as Dr. Booty, who's the chief pulmonologist at Bon Secours, and we were also very careful to watch CDC guidelines and respond to the best science that was available to us at the time. We decided to go to a hybrid model. So we started doing outside services late summer. We erected a very large tent, but just with a canopy, no sidewalls to allow for ventilation. We still required social distancing. We still required masks. We issued people their prayer books so they didn't have to put them back on stacks. And we put screens, and we had Torah scrolls, and we were able to do that for a couple of months, including through the high holy days. Those who were comfortable and who were willing to follow the rules were welcome in person, and for everybody else, it was streamed out. When the weather started getting colder, it coincided with this last surge. So the board and I pulled the plug on that. But we are now we are going to go back to it, and our first in-person service is going to be April 3rd, which is the seventh day of Passover on Shabbat, and we will once again resume in person outside. We're still not ready to go back inside because of packets and aerosols and things like that, and we'll still be streaming. So, and we figure with the weather through the summer, we should be fine.
I think all of us would agree that if this happened 5 years ago and we did not have the technology as modern as it is for Zooming or Googling or other forms of conferencing, it would be a very, very different situation. And we really have to be thankful for that. And all wish we probably had stock in it as well. And probably none of us do, because I don't see any of us as financial whizzes either. But
Peter,
yeah.
I just wanted to point out, we have Keith has his hand raised over here. He has a question to ask.
Okay.
Before I forget, because he's had it raised for a few minutes.
Oh, okay.
Thanks so much. So first of all, I would like to thank all the panels. So I think this has been a great moment, and I would say a session for me to learn how much similarities we have across the cultures, across the faith traditions. It's very impressive to see, despite like being a Hindu or like Christian, Jew, Muslim, I think tonight what I have felt is our humanness. So this is very interesting. Like when I hear the story in India, like the family, right? what Sheila, you are telling about, those three, father, mother, and child, they are all in different hospitals. It kind of really hurt your heart, right? Because you don't look as a Hindu, you look as a human being. So a lot of stories too. But I think like we share our common grievances too, as we share our happinesses. And tonight, I think it was very important to hear about this challenging year. So first of all, I want to thank all the panels for really sharing their traditions and telling about different aspects of what has happened so far. I have a question for Mr. Nelson about maybe the funeral home, and also one question for Rabbi Marco. So for Mr. Nelson, the question is, we know that during the COVID, the death rate really has increased. And then I wonder if that has created any challenges in terms of burials and not be able to accommodating the burials because of the demand. I don't know if there was a significant increase in terms of the demand of the death rate you might have had. The question for Rabbi Marco, I don't know if I really misunderstood or not. Let me just verify. So did you tell you have a tradition of like tearing off the cloth as a part of the grief? So can you elaborate what it is, where it comes, what's the purpose for that one? Thank you.
Okay, we call it kriya, which literally means tearing. The earliest reference that I know of is from the book of Genesis. If you remember the story of Joseph and his brothers, they fool their father Jacob into thinking that he's been killed by wild beasts by dipping his coat in the blood. And Jacob's response was to tear his clothing, was to rend his clothing. And you'll see it throughout the Bible, throughout later books of the Bible. When someone dies, they would rend their garments, they would tear their clothing. And this is something that has been traditional throughout Jewish history. And for a long time, if you think about our people were landless and without citizenship for thousands of years, and for the most part quite poor. You maybe had two sets of clothing. Maybe you had your work clothes that you wore all week long, and you had something a little bit nicer that you would put on for Shabbat. So to tear your clothing was, was quite an expensive thing. And when you hear immediately upon hearing the death of someone, you ought to rend your clothing. So either they would get very, very good at sewing areas, and there's certainly a drosh, there's a sermon in that the areas that you heal generally become a little bit stronger. Like if you break a bone, where that bone sets is stronger than the other places. And with clothing too, if you sew something, that area gets pretty strong. But it always leaves a mark. There's always a scar. There's always something visible about it. Or later on, just as a matter of practicality, we started, instead of tearing those one or two sets of clothing we have, we started pinning on a ribbon. We would pin a ribbon on and then tear that ribbon with a blessing. And that's what we do now. They're called kriya ribbons. They're little black buttons. And then we generally will say to people who are in mourning, if they're in the immediate mourning, one of the close 7 relations, which would be a father, mother, brother, sister, son, daughter, God forbid, or spouse. Those 7, they would wear that for a full 7 days during that initial period of mourning.
In a way, I also want to add to that, Akif, it's a physical thing that someone can do. You want to do something, and you want to cry out almost. So you tear a garment, but there's also you can't tear it too much. There's the halakha says, you mustn't do it too much, like rip it. And it also is a sign to other people that you're in mourning, so they'll treat you as such. So it serves a lot of practical purposes.
Thank you for reminding Peter. As a matter of fact, the ribbons, our tradition is to place it over our hearts. You pin the ribbon over your heart, and that's where normally someone might have torn. And I say, when we tear it, it's a symbolic tearing of our heart, and it's also it's a means of making an opening to allow our emotions to flow. That people want that whole stiff upper lip mentality.
No.
You know, no, your body and your soul knows what they need to do. It's our job to sort of get out of the way and let them do what they need to do to begin the process of healing, and to allow oneself to have one's grief, to be in mourning, and to feel that pain and to show it.
The first part of Akif's question, Eddie, I hate to ask it this way, but over the past year, has there been an increase of people dying, and has that affected your business to the point where it's really put pressure on it?
Yeah, there has been an increase in death over the last year. And some of the things that we have encountered in doing with as far as arranging for final disposition of those decedents is scheduling for cemeteries. My area, most of the churches that we serve have what we call the private church cemetery. So we don't have really any problems with that. The only thing that we are not allowed and able to do where we try to have the family to be as comfortable as possible at the place of disposition by providing chairs for them to sit in, things of that nature. So now they're basically going out and we're just at the disposition site and basically standing. So it's sort of a non-personal relationship that we have, and they are distance. And the same thing alludes to the perpetual care cemeteries when we go into the cities. They are basically scheduling you with a time and a scheduled date and a time that you have to be there to keep that appointment, because they don't want to interface other funeral homes coming in to maybe taint, per se, the situation that we have at hand.
Yeah. Imam, I'm not sure if you know that in this area, the upstate is the first natural cemetery in the United States where people are allowed to be buried in, well, they have to be buried in material that will deteriorate, not coffins and things of that nature. So natural burial out in the woods, etc. Right up in this area, a doctor and his wife established the cemetery a number of years ago, and I'm wondering if they have issues, given that. I'm building a home, Eddie, and this is probably a very inappropriate question, but I know the cost of lumber has gone up drastically. Has the cost of caskets increased because of it?
The cost has increased, and not only has the cost increased, but the availability of caskets.
That's what I thought.
We're now having to, if we're having services and contacting our suppliers, our casket companies, we're basically trying to have to contact them where we could arrangement today. I made arrangement with the family today, and immediately I called the casket company in the presence of the family to make sure that that particular casket they had chosen was available. So there is a shortage on the products, and it's a lot due to the raw materials that we're having and that we can't get, that's sitting out on the sea in the boats and stuff of that nature that we can't get. And so the prices has increased on the products.
Yeah, something else you mentioned about meeting appointment times at a place of burial. A friend of mine, Chris Hebner, Akif, did a burial at Arlington National Cemetery some time ago, and you have a 20-minute slot to get a burial in there. Under normal circumstances, it has to be done. So I'm sure that at that location, it's probably even more difficult than it has been in the past.
Even at Fort Jackson National Cemetery in Columbia, when we go there, they allot us 15 minutes, And even in that 15 minutes period of time where we used to could allow 15 to 20 people, it's only like 6 people can gather under the portico area.
And that's where they also train the military chaplains at Fort Jackson.
Yeah. Let me mention just this. The Muslims up in the Greenville area, they have a burial site.
Mhm.
They have their own burial site. We have 3 burial sites here in the Columbia area. And so we do not have to use a vault or a casket. And I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, go ahead, finish. I thought, let's finish your thought.
No, I was just indicating that the cost for burial item, don't want to
And just to
say anything to Mr. Nelson, but
no, just to let you know, by the state law in the state of South Carolina, there is no statute requiring an outer burial container or casket. But over the years, through Christian burials, it has always been practiced that we have a casket. And I have done several earth burials up in Westminster,
Right.
that area. And my first one when I was up there, it was very, it was different, but very nice. It was.
I've done 3 myself up there.
Yeah, and so it's there. The takeaway is that there isn't a requirement for a outer burial container or a casket, but it's been customary that Christian burials enclose in a casket.
And up there, the marker has to be a rock from the location. You can't have a regular marker like you would at many other cemeteries.
Exactly.
And I want to add that in reference to, we were talking about how we deal with grieving. There's a saying in Islam, to God we belong, and to God is our return. Meaning that life and death, they belong to the same system. Just as sure as you are born into this world, you're going to transition out. There's a life after this life that we believe in. So it helps to know that we're all going to follow that pathway out of here. We can't get out of this world except through the door of that transition of death. And it's not the end of it for us. I'm saying this helps with the grieving process. It's not the end,
right.
But it's the beginning of another stage in our development. We won't come back here, but it's another stage. So that helps in the grieving process also, that all of us, I think the rabbi said something earlier, all of us will have to go this way. There's no other way for us to get out of here except through
Not me. Not me.
Shall I put another thought into that? Before you're born, you're somewhere else, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you, after your death, once you leave the body, you're going to be somewhere. Then before you are born, because that's time you get the body, you're somewhere else. So from God we come, because before you get this body, that's why we think our body is just a place where the soul stays. And when the body gets bad, unusable, you just change it into different clothing. That was the idea in Indian thought.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go a little beyond it, it's all the consciousness in which you come and you go. As a wave comes in the ocean and goes down, dissolve. Today is Shiva's day, the Lord of dissolution. So there are all over the place in the world, they are praying Lord Shiva, who is supposed to be the God of dissolution. Gets these things and dissolve it. They don't destruct it, but it dissolves back into the same essence. And from there we come back. I'm sorry, I just thought you're talking about going back, but I say coming in is equally important, because once you get your body, it grows, it gets bad, and then you go you leave it, and then you hopefully go into something else. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
That's the part. And that's why I said that in Hindu philosophy, we have a ritualistic way of dying. After you die, they do rituals. They feed the crows, they do that, they see this mantra and that mantra, and let you go to the people where your forefathers has gone. We invite them to take you with them. That is the ritual part of it. But then there is a religious part where we get together and sing the songs like from Gita, where we say, we all come back, we grow and we drop the body and we go there, because that's the way the cycle of life goes on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so to what you call decimate the pain, they talk about these religious ideas. So there is a strictly rituals. Then there is a religious idea where we sing the songs from Gita and a lot of other things about how we feel bad and how our life is more than our body that is gone. And then there is a social element where we meet the person who is most hurt. And we say that, oh, if you want anything, please go. Give the support, give the help, and we cry with them a little bit. But that is all about the social level. So people coming together is very important to make a peace with the people who are really getting hurt. And then there is a highly spiritual idea that hold this panel. Let me see. All this panel is mine and I'm them. So there is nothing that I lose, right? Because everything in the world is my consciousness, if it goes to that level. So you can be explaining anything, including the death, in those 4 levels of spiritual maturity.
Christina, you
Yes.
were going to say?
Yes. Thank you.
I just blow your head out. That's how Vedic things are. They make your head go out of your thoughts.
Yes, that was all of this is so very interesting, and I just love that we're all able to sit and have this conversation. We have been going for probably about an hour and a half, and so I know we'd like to wrap everything up. I know it's Pastor Brewster had to get going, and we had somebody else that had to get going. They said goodbye privately in a private message. Is there one, Eddie, you have a thought? Is there one question?
There was one thought as we were listening to the dialogue and the conversations. When I first went into mortuary school, one of the professors told us the first thing that he told us: hurt has no boundaries. Hurt has no boundaries. So as we talk tonight and hear everyone speaking and talking about their different cultures and everything, it all reverts back to hurt, and that hurt has no boundaries. That boundaries means color, nationalities, etc.
Yes, very true.
Very true. Does anyone who has been listening have any particular questions or comments?
Go ahead, come on.
Hi everyone. I'm Roger Acton. I get to be a chaplain as a Christian chaplain with businesses. I also have the privilege of doing full-time work with victims of crime connected with all faiths. Several of the folks speaking tonight have blessed me. But my comment I thought was really interesting that you all brought out was we all have this compassionate need to still connect in spite of COVID. That through the crisis, we still have to get creative. But we still need to find ways to touch because we can't just live. As much as I love the screen, I think I heard Iman Shahid note, you've got to find ways to connect. But I got to give you one last encouragement. I love the power of families. These families who've been separated from other members of your faith, have learned to now raise up their kids with the heart of your faith when they can't be with all of you, but they've taken what you've given them and are, I hope, and again, that comes with accountability, but it can make a greater difference. So there's this unique blessing that's coming out of this, that parents are starting to realize they can be a part of the ministry where they used to just come and let you talk to them. I think we need to keep looking how that can be a plus, but also I still pray each one of you get chances to connect personally because the touch of our human nature is so important. So again, thank you so much. This has been really encouraging. I love the oneness of our hearts and the opportunities to make a difference in those last days.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yes, thank you.
it is. I do taxis, right? Today, one of my couple that I do taxis for last 10 years, she showed up herself. And I say, by yourself? And we both started crying because I knew something happened to her husband who passed away by COVID or implications of COVID. And I don't think my tears and her tears were really different, because by just knowing that she walked in herself, I knew that something is, because they always came together, we joked and all that. And I realized that, and she knew that I know that. And that's why she had a tear, I had a tear, because I couldn't see that she walked by herself. So what I think is the family is not only because of your genetic and parents, the family grows to all humanity.
Yes.
It doesn't matter whether you're Christian. I don't even know. She's probably Baptist. But I don't know it. But we can, at lower level in hearts, we can see each other. Still, we are together as a family. That's what the idea is.
Yes.
Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, they call it in Sanskrit. The whole
Does anyone else?
universe is a whole family. It's a family.
Yes. Does anyone else who has not spoken have a question or a comment?
If not,
Joanne, you're quiet.
if
Joanne
not,
is from Theosophical Society.
so if not, I just want to say thank you to everybody and just thank you for being here. Yes, thank you, love, to everyone from Deborah. She said you can unmute yourself if you want. We'd like to go ahead and end and say goodnight. I get a heart from Rabbi Matt. Very cool. So we appreciate you. This conversation was recorded, and so it'll be up on our YouTube channel. You can share it with anybody that you missed it that might be interested to listen to it. Roger, I gotta think you might be getting cold sitting out there.
Yeah, the blanket has helped.
Oh, good. Like, it's not time to go inside now.
Yeah, I'm ready to finish up and give an amen or amen.
Sounds good to me.
I thank you all for being here tonight, and thank you very much,
Thank you all.
Peter,
Stay safe, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoyed it.
Be well, everyone.
Remember the most alaikum salam, the
Salam.
most dangerous part of a journey
Shalom alaikum.
are the final steps, the final miles. So
Yes.
so let's keep our vigilance. Let's not let down our guard yet and think this is all over. Those last few miles are the most important. Keep
Yes.
yourself safe, keep your community safe, keep your family safe, and may God be with you all.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you,
Get
Rabbi.
Thank you. You
inoculated.
too, Rabbi Marco.
Thank y'all. Thank you.
Salam alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Shalom.
Thank you.